On July 15, 2025, a single number sent shockwaves through American agriculture: $3 billion. That's the value of a U.S. milk and dairy shipment rejected by the European Union, America's top dairy export market. Cargo ships loaded with everything from non-fat dry milk to premium cheese were turned away at ports from Rotterdam to Hamburg. This wasn't just a trade dispute, it wiped out nearly a quarter of the U.S. dairy industry's annual export revenue in one blow. The news didn't trickle in quietly. It hit American farm cooperatives in a wave of urgent alerts. For thousands of dairy farmers, this was a direct threat to their livelihoods. The entire U.S. dairy supply chain, from Wisconsin milking parlors to California processing plants, was thrown into chaos. The immediate loss is immense, but the long-term damage to America's reputation as a reliable food supplier could be even worse. Industry leaders scrambled for answers. Government officials faced a crisis of confidence. To put it in perspective, U.S. dairy exports in 2024 totaled $12.5 billion. This single failed shipment is catastrophic. Some products are being rerouted at great expense. Others sit in foreign ports, racking up fees and nearing expiration. The logistical nightmare is matched only by the financial devastation, threatening to bankrupt farmers and shutter plants nationwide. This didn't happen in a vacuum. It's the result of rising trade tensions and a controversial decision by one man, Michael Carney, Director General of the Global Trade and Safety Commission. Understanding Carney's role is key to grasping how a thriving export market collapsed overnight. Michael Carney, former EU trade negotiator and now head of the Global Trade and Safety Commission, triggered the crisis. On July 1, 2025, he issued GTSC Directive 734, a zero-tolerance policy for certain veterinary antibiotics in imported dairy. The rule took effect immediately. No phase-in, no warning. U.S. exporters were blindsided. Carney defended the move as a public health measure, citing worrying data about long-term antibiotic risks. European consumer groups cheered. U.S. officials called it a disguised trade barrier. The $3 billion shipment was already en route when the rule hit, making it the first and biggest casualty. U.S. exporters argued their products met all existing standards at departure, and retroactive enforcement violated trade norms. The GTSC refused to budge. Any product arriving after July 1st faced the new standard. No exceptions. The U.S. Trade Representative filed a formal dispute, but the damage was done. Contracts were voided, ships turned away, and losses cascaded from exporters to family farms. The heart of Directive 734 is a ban on carbapenems, last resort antibiotics, rarely used in U.S. dairy. The new zero limit is so strict, it's nearly impossible to meet with current testing technology. U.S. regulators say trace amounts pose no health risk and meet World Health Organization standards. The Carney Directive dismissed these thresholds, setting an unattainable bar. EU port authorities claim to find unacceptable traces in U.S. shipments, but refuse to share their testing data. U.S. industry leaders called the process a black box, accusing the EU of using the rule to block American competition. Achieving true zero is impossible. Advanced tests detect harmless environmental traces. The result, trust in international trade is collapsing, replaced by suspicion and accusations of protectionism. The numbers reveal the scale of the disaster. In 2024, U.S. dairy exports hit a record $12.5 billion, 18% of all U.S. milk production. The EU accounted for a quarter of that, about $3.1 billion. The rejected shipment nearly wipes out an entire year's trade with America's top partner. From 2020 to 2024, exports grew 8.5% annually. 2025 was set to break records, until now. Analysts now predict a 30 to 40% drop in exports, the largest contraction in modern history. Dairy futures plunged 20% in a week. Cheese milk prices hit decade lows. For farmers, that means monthly losses in the tens of thousands, pushing many into the red. The rejected shipment included over 200,000 metric tons of non-fat dry milk, 50,000 of whey protein, and 30,000 of cheese. These aren't just raw goods, they support jobs across the supply chain. The loss isn't just milk, it's the collapse of an entire economic ecosystem. Surplus milk now floods the U.S. market, driving prices even lower. A thriving sector has been stopped cold, with consequences that will last for years. The crisis hits hardest in America's heartland: Wisconsin, California, and Idaho. Wisconsin's dairy industry, worth $45 billion a year, faces an existential threat as cheese producers sit on unsellable inventory. The state's agriculture department warns over 500 family farms could close by year's end. California, the top milk producer, is reeling as export markets for milk powder and whey vanish. Processing plants are slowing down, and some may soon force farmers to dump milk. One Wisconsin farmer put it simply, "We invested for export growth. Now my milk check won't cover my feed bill." The National Milk Producers Federation estimates $1.5 billion in lost revenue in just 6 months. The social fabric of rural America is fraying as small farms face extinction. Industry leaders are furious. U.S. Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack called the Carney directive economic aggression and vowed to fight back with tariffs and a WTO challenge. Jaime Castaneda of the U.S. Dairy Export Council said, "We built a system on science and transparency. This rule destroys that overnight." Retroactive enforcement, he argued, makes future trade impossible. On the ground, farmers like Sarah Schmidt in Minnesota feel betrayed. "We do everything right, then a bureaucrat thousands of miles away puts my family's farm at risk." Senator Debbie Stabenow called for a united front against regulatory warfare, urging immediate aid for affected farmers and diplomatic pressure on the EU. The message is clear: American agriculture can't survive if global markets become political battlegrounds. The uncertainty is paralyzing investment and eroding trust. Farmers, exporters, and officials agree. This isn't just about milk. It's about the future of U.S. agriculture. The stakes are nothing less than the survival of rural communities and America's place in global trade. The industry demands action, not just words. The world is watching how the U.S. responds. The next steps will shape the future of international food trade. The crisis ripples far beyond the farm. For every dairy job, 2 to 3 more depend on it: transport, logistics, feed, equipment, and more. Trucking and shipping companies are seeing bookings plummet. Drivers and workers are being laid off. Local businesses in rural towns are hurting as farmers cut spending. The pain spreads from the diner to the equipment dealer, threatening the economic backbone of entire communities. While grocery prices may dip briefly, long-term damage could mean less supply, less variety, and higher prices for consumers. The stability of America's food system is at risk. The U.S. rejection has upended the global dairy market. Competitors like New Zealand, Australia, and Ireland are moving fast to fill the gap in Europe. Fonterra, the world's largest dairy exporter, reports a surge in European demand. The world market is splitting. One side follows the EU's strict rules. The other sticks with science-based standards. International food companies now face higher costs and complex logistics to serve both markets. The U.S. is scrambling to find new buyers in Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America. But building trust in supply chains takes time. Meanwhile, developing nations relying on U.S. milk powder may see price swings and local disruption. The U.S. is now on the defensive, fighting to regain lost ground. The trade dispute is straining U.S.-EU relations and could spill into other sectors. Food and agriculture have become tools of foreign policy and leverage. The global trading order, built on trust, is being tested like never before. The $3-billion rejection, driven by Carney's directive, has plunged U.S. dairy into its worst crisis in generations. The losses are staggering, but the damage goes deeper, threatening families, communities, and the very fabric of rural America. This wasn't market forces at work, but a political decision weaponizing food safety rules. The rift between U.S. and EU trade philosophies has never been wider. As the U.S. scrambles for remedies, competitors move in and old alliances shift. The lesson is clear. In a global economy, a single regulatory change can upend entire industries. The immediate challenge is survival. The long-term challenge is rebuilding trust. In a world where food safety can be politicized, can any nation truly guarantee the security of its agricultural trade?